Connecting life and faith. This is Connections.
Imagine being able to go back in time to experience the stories of the Bible, specifically the Old Testament stories of survival, redemption, and divine purpose. Well, today's guest has taken those stories and made them immersive in a new podcast called The Chosen People. We're joined today by Yael Eckstein. She is the president and CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Today, she is going to share with us more about this podcast and what inspired her to do it. Well, we're joined today by Yael Eckstein. She is the president and CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. But that's not all. You've got something new and exciting that has recently released. But before we get around to that, we want to get to know you a little bit better for our listeners who have never had the opportunity to hear about you. Just tell us about yourself and what you do.
Okay, well, I guess, it's hard to summarize it as I feel like I wear so many hats. I am blessed to be a mother of four. I have four children. My oldest is 18 and my baby is 8. We just got our second puppy, so that's very exciting. It feels like a big milestone in our family around here. I have an incredible husband. I was raised in Chicago, studied in college in New York at Queens College, and then got married in New York and moved to Israel over 20 years ago with my husband. So we've been living here in the Holy Land since. And today I run and oversee the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, which is the largest nonprofit organization in Israel. So we're focused on feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, sheltering the poor, and really just bringing hope to the people of Israel, especially now during this time of war and struggle.
Well, that's so important. One of the most recent ventures that you've conquered is a new podcast. It's called The Chosen People. Tell us about this and where this idea came from.
Well, it's really exciting. It's a new project. It's something that as I oversee the ministry and our life-saving humanitarian work, which is on the forefront of bringing biblical prophecy to fruition, and we just kind of look at the scriptures and then make it happen on the ground, which is a really cool thing to make happen. Partner with God in that and bringing persecuted Jews home from all four corners of the earth, just as Isaiah and Jeremiah foresaw thousands of years ago. And now it's like, oh yeah, Christians and Jews are coming together to fulfill the word of God. That's amazing. And so I realized that on top of just being a humanitarian organization, there's something very unique that we're doing. And it's because we're here on the ground in Israel. I want people to connect to that. Unfortunately, Israel has gotten such a bad name. And I also think that is part of kind of prophecy coming to fruition, that Isaiah said at the end of days, good will be called bad, bad will be called good, light will be called darkness, darkness will be called light. That is kind of, we see that happening when you see people who stand for freedom and democracy and diversity standing up for Hamas terrorists or Hezbollah, or questioning if bin Laden was really so bad. You realize that there is something overcoming this earth that is making people really confused. And so I guess I look at it as my responsibility, obligation, and deep privilege to be able to do whatever I can from here in Israel to connect people to the Holy Land, not of the news cycles, but that I live every single day. So the podcast of The Chosen People is part of that.
And now I want to talk about the podcast right away in greater detail. But since you are living there, we would love to hear from your own perspective. What is life like? Is it constantly filled with tension? What do you experience on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's really, I think, just like the story of the Jewish people, which, we talk about in the podcast of the chosen nation, the chosen people. I think that Israel today is living in this place of paradox. On one hand, we are the only Jewish homeland. On the other hand, we have Christians, Druze, Muslims, Bedouins living with full equality here in Israel. In this tiny country of Israel, the size of New Jersey, we have more kind of what you would call minorities here, non-Jews, who have equal rights of equal free education and free healthcare and serving in the Knesset and creating policy than the amount of Jews in the entire Middle East. And so you have one Jewish country with 7.5 million Jewish people and around 2 million non-Jews who have full equality. And in the entire Middle East, you have around 400 million Arabs with around 30,000 Jews. So again, just taking, what's being said, and it's from here in Israel, looking at it as what? We're the only Jewish homeland, but we believe in full equality for everyone, not because we want to appease anyone, but because those are the Jewish values. Those are the biblical values. Those are the Christian values. Those are the Judeo-Christian values of giving equality and freedom to anyone who doesn't want to kill you. And so I guess that kind of represents our daily life of living in the middle. So on one hand, me and my children and my husband were woken up many times a week by sirens saying a rocket is headed towards our city. And as you know, the siren system in Israel, it doesn't just go for the whole country. It goes to specific cities if there's a rocket or suicide drone headed to you. And so we wake up, we hear the siren, we have 90 seconds to make it to a bomb shelter, to close the door. We often have to decide if we bring in our dogs or not, if we have time to get them, if they're outside or in a different room, do we have time to bring them into the bomb shelter? And do we risk our lives like that? If I'm in the car with my 4 children, thank God they're big, but I have friends who have babies that the siren goes off and they have to decide which little kid are they going to unbuckle and bring to the bomb shelter. They can't unbuckle all 4 and bring them to the shelter in time. So does the mother just stay in the car and, pray and hope that the rocket doesn't hit the car? Or does she take one child to the shelter to protect them? So on one hand, it's tense and it's scary. And my children during school have had to go many times without me to the bomb shelter as the sirens blaring. They've been in many rocket attacks where they knew they're targeted and the terrorists are trying to wipe Israel off the map. But on the other hand, life in many ways is happy and fun, and we go out to eat, and we continue to celebrate weddings, and we continue to celebrate birthday parties, and we continue to have play dates, and we continue to go to the park and to the beach, and to hold this place of joy of, okay, when we're in the bomb shelter, we're praying and it's intense, and we're waiting for the rocket to land and hoping that no one will be hurt. But when it's over, it's over. When we are able and given the blessing of living, we're not going to waste it by living in fear. We're going to live by enjoying every single second.
Wow. That is very inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing your own perspective. I appreciate that. Back to the podcast, I would love to know what is the importance of the Old Testament stories and bringing those to life for not only the Jewish people, but also for Christians?
Yeah. Well, I think that these are the roots of both faith, Jews and Christians. And the stories in the Hebrew Bible, they are the essence of being human and being people of faith as we're wrestling with God to find purpose amid tragedy and sin. What's incredible about the characters in the Old Testament is that they're not perfect, and yet they are loved by God, and yet they are called by God to start this whole new reality in the world of monotheistic faiths. They're not perfect, and yet they have a mission and a calling. And for me, that's where I find my inspiration and where I have just this very strong desire to share it with others. You're not perfect, but that doesn't mean God doesn't love you. You're not perfect, but that doesn't mean God isn't going to use you in a huge way. Okay, you're lacking in faith, you're lacking in action, you're lacking in all these things that you wish you would have done, but you know what? It's never too late to turn around. And we see that story from kind of as a nation and as a people in the story of Noah that we're focusing on this week, that we see kind of, God was angry, God destroyed the world, but he said he'll never do it again. And even with Noah messed up, Noah fell. He came out of the teva, out of the boat, and he fell. He planted, grapes and got drunk. But you know what? He's the father of all of humanity now. That's where we all came from. And God chose him, and God loved him, and God believed that he was going to continue passing on this tradition of trusting in God even within the brokenness. And we see with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, we see with Moses that God called Moses to be the giver of God's message to the people forever. And Moses said, but I have a lisp. God chose someone with a lisp. And so I think that these messages are more important than ever when we're choosing our leaders by who's the most articulate, not who has the best values. We're choosing the people that we want to listen to by who's performing the best and wearing the coolest clothes. I think God is giving us such a clear message through the Hebrew scriptures that even when we fall, he will pick us up if we let him. And that through the story of Israel, I believe that everyone can realize that they are chosen for such a time as this. It's not a matter of the chosen people being different or having a different or better, mission here. That no. The story of the biblical chosen people, of the Jewish people, is a story for the world that should awaken everyone's heart of, oh, I'm chosen. Oh, God loves me. Oh, God has a mission on my life. And that kind of, if you'll believe it, in short, I have a lot more to say on that, is what I hope to accomplish with this podcast.
Now, speaking of that podcast, it is stunning. Like the trailer to introduce this podcast is unbelievable. It's cinematic. What can people expect when they listen to this podcast? Is it your average podcast where you're hearing people just chatting back and forth, or is this something that's more, I guess, again, I'm going to use the word cinematic, that just brings you in and makes you feel as though you're in that moment?
Yes, this is not your average podcast. We had actually a whole 100-piece symphony write the music for the podcast, and it is the most incredible. Like if you've ever watched, what was it called again? The Story of Moses. It was like a Disney. I forgot what it's called now.
Oh, Prince of Egypt.
Yes, thank you. Prince of Egypt. That was kind of the inspiration for this,
The music was incredible in there.
Yes, exactly. So the idea is that the Bible should come alive. And for all of us who have read the Bible, it's kind of like you already know what's going to happen and you're already anticipating the next verse. And so it's hard to kind of live it in the moment and imagine what's really happening in that minute. Like when the Israelites are leaving Egypt and they get to the sea before the sea splits. We all know it's going to split, so it's not so exciting, But when you're watching it in this cinematographic, the cinema of it and the visuals of it, and you feel it with the music and the art and it's very, very, very dramatic. And so I think that we need to feel the drama of the Bible in order to understand the message that God is giving us. And when it's passed down for so long, it's beautiful because we know those stories like the back of our hand, but we also lose something in it because we don't feel it as much. And so there's Jewish commentary, there's Christian commentary, there's incredible music, incredible visuals, and there's the drama of the Bible that even for me, I watch it, I'm like, wow, I have all these new thoughts and new emotions and new messages from it, that I think that that's the beauty of the Bible, that God is speaking to us through it, not just from thousands of years ago when he gave it on Mount Sinai, but he's speaking through it today to us in our life. And that's what I hope that people will feel when they watch it.
Amazing. The living word. I love it.
Yes.
So if people are interested in finding out more about the Chosen People podcast or about International Fellowship of Christian and Jews, how can they do so?
Well, you can find the Chosen People podcast on any of the podcast platforms. You can watch it, of course, on pray.com. This was an incredible partnership between the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews and pray.com. So you can go to pray.com, watch, and they have many other amazing podcasts as well. You can also watch it on the Apple Podcast Forum. We have gotten such good feedback that not only did we get over 30,000 signups for the podcast from one email that was sent out before it launched, but since it launched, we've had hundreds of thousands of downloads, millions of listening minutes, and people are just saying that it is opening up their eyes to studying the scriptures in a way that they never have before. So we have a new episode that's launched every day, 5 days a week. So I invite you to look for and download and listen to The Chosen People on any podcast forum. And you can learn more about the fellowship at ifcj.org. That's ifcj.org. And write comments in the podcast, wherever you're listening to it, write comments there because I read them and I love them, and it helps me to adapt the future podcast to exactly what you're looking for.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for making time for us. We appreciate it.
You guys are incredible.
So,
thank you for having me on.